on Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. But before that, very quickly touching on the theme of today's plenary session itself, that what do mega corridors really mean for this region, and how does it connect East and West? And more importantly, how is India's Act East policy getting impacted by the mega corridors that are now either under consideration or under construction or at a planning stage? And how are different memberships and different components of mega corridors affecting the connectivities between East and West, western part of this part of the world? And Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is addressing some of these very fundamental issues of connectivity and development. And it is mostly an economic construct, but it is entirely based on the practical, ethical, and responsible aspects of development, many of which Honorable Minister raised in his opening address for this session. And I'll quickly run the audience here today, including my fellow panelists, on the fundamentals of Asia-Africa Growth Corridor and how they are impacting India's Act East policy, what is India's role in this, and finally, what does Asia-Africa Growth Corridor mean for development per se in Asia and Africa. So very quickly, Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is based on some very fundamental premises. It's practical, and these premises are practical, ethical, and responsive. The Asia-Africa Growth Corridor brings the development experience of East Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia together. And it is making a case for greater economic connectivity and cooperation for development between two mega regions, that is Asia and Africa, but it forecasts a further connectivity with other parts of the world, which is Europe. And the paradigm of Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is based on, and this is where the value systems come in, which Minister spoke about. It is based on the freedom to pursue development plans that are suitable for and in sync with the development priorities of countries both in Asia and Africa. And last but not the least, this is something which Honorable Minister for External Affairs in the inaugural session had mentioned. AAGC is, and it is important for India to note as well, that AAGC, that is Asia-Africa Growth Corridor for short, is a responsive and a non-hegemonic program of growth for Asia and Africa. I will lead the AAGC explanation very quickly along 4 tracks, and there is an additional track of inclusive development. Number 1 is that Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is based on 4 core components. It includes development and cooperation projects. Those are the hard aspects of it. It includes quality infrastructure for connectivity. This is also the hard aspect. There is a capacity and skill enhancement which sort of embraces all other development and cooperation projects, including infrastructure and hard physical connectivity. And this is both hard and soft kind. And last but not the least, this is the people-to-people partnership, which is not the last, but is actually at the core of all the development programs of AAGC. The very unique feature about AAGC is that it came out of the India-Japan bilateral relations, but is not confined to just India and Japan's mandate for either bilateral or multilateral. It transcends the interests of the bilateral relations between the two countries, and that is a very unique feature about this particular bilateral relations also, which should not go unnoticed and unremarked upon. And Asia-Africa Growth Corridor also addresses the SDG agenda of 2030, the Africa Union agenda of 2063, and the infrastructure development in Africa. That's the PIDA, as many people know. And finally, at a value level, this connectivity program, this particular mega corridor program, is based on equal partnership, mutual trust, and cooperation. Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is creating a new value chain of growth and connectivity. Commerce is at its core. Commerce is a great healer of and bridges the gaps that exist between countries and regions. However, AAGC is based on the learnings that we have derived from development stories in Asia and the recent learnings that we have derived from the global financial crisis, how globalization is under attack, because AAGC does not operate in exclusivity, it operates in a global environment. That is to say that, that what is happening in other parts of the world has an effect on how AAGC is constructed. What we have learned from Asia and the GFC is that the current value chains of production of goods and services also, in some cases, are either stagnating or they are overloaded. So there is a huge need for creating new value chains of productions for goods and services. And there is a saying which is currently going around that new things are happening in old places and old things are happening in new places. AAGC is actually a construct based on this. India's investment, which is to say investment not in capital terms, historical investments in Africa, everybody knows about. But these are the times, and this is the old part of it. AAGC is the new activity which is being constructed on Asia's, and India in particular, old historical relationships with Africa. Globalization has also taught us the very need for sharing of the prosperity which is arising out of globalization. AAGC is responsive to this demand for sharing of prosperity. We have also learned from Asian developments is that no one particular country is in a position any longer to lead regional development. TPP has shown us this. RCEP's non-conclusion is also pointing in the same direction. Therefore, there is a huge crying need for a non-hegemonic, bilateral, even trilateral, and multilateral programs of connectivity. And the moment we step into bilateral, trilateral, multilateral connectivity programs, immediately we are faced with putting in place a need for digital and regulatory connectivity, because without these multilateral and where more than 2 members are existing, these connectivity programs cannot be run smoothly. Yes. So therefore, it is more than an economic corridor. Very quickly, I come to India's role in this. India, as very Honorable Minister mentioned, has found a geographical dividend in AAGC. The important thing is to put in place processes and structures which can actually reap India's centrality in AAGC. The Indian Ocean Rim is also a trans-regional dividend, and AAGC will be the roadmap to reap this. AAGC is further advancing the cause for responsive and inclusive development. And finally, AAGC is also redefining regionalism as we have known it. We know that there are various other multilateral projects going around, including, and they have found a home in many other countries beyond Asia and Africa. The Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank is one of this. The Belt and Road Initiative is another such program. Then there are ports development happening around us. Prabir captured many of these programs. Then there are multimodal projects. All these need to be seen in one single construct, which move into each other seamlessly. We have learned from Asia that there is no such thing as seamless connectivity. What we can attempt at as a greater and freer movement of goods, capital, people, across the region, and Asia-Africa Growth Corridor is essentially reducing these distances between Asia and Africa and creating a greater reach. And finally, I will conclude with one idea, is that connectivity per se and mega corridors have been around for quite some time, but ideas mature only when their time comes, and perhaps now we are in that zone where a project like AAGC can actually fly, because that time is here and present. Thank you.